Is it time to buy real estate now? Let's find out. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode at NOVARISE Invest, your channel for financial education. So today's episode, it's to answer the most popular question all throughout our YouTube channel. Is it or is it not time to buy a house? What should I do, right? So what we're going to do today is to obviously do a quick market research so that we can understand what's happening in the market, what's contributing to current market prices, the housing prices, which are, by the way, very elevated, and also what's happening to the interest rates, right? Take all of that information, package it for you so that it can help you make an informed decision as to whether it is a good moment for you to be buying real estate or to be purchasing a house. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have this very first article right here, courtesy of Fortune magazine, and the article refers to the investors, including Wall Street, who helped drive up housing prices during the pandemic housing boom. And here is the proof, okay? So according to this article, since the onset of the pandemic housing boom, investors have flooded the U.S. housing market. And these are players like the mom and pop landlords, Airbnb hosts who are adding to the property portfolios. We also have home flippers who are, by the way, returning with vengeance. And there's also the Wall Street players like Blackstones and the iBuyers of the world, which includes companies like Open Door Technologies that are, by the way, gobbling up homes, right? As if this wasn't enough, we also have the combination of low mortgage rates, easy access to capital, because as you know, over the last 24 months, our government has been doing nothing but to just swamp the market with free dollars, right? We got the stimulus check, we got the SBA loans, the EIDLs, PPP, you name it, right? So very easy access to capital and also record appreciation. When you combine all of these factors, it is too exciting and too good for investors to pass up on, right? Now, others might disagree with this statement, right? Because according to this article, even if investors piled up into the housing market, many real estate insiders over the past 2 years hesitated to attribute much, if any, the boom to the investors. In their view, meaning in their investors' view, they think that numerous factors drove the housing frenzy, right? So the fact that there are historical low mortgages, this can be attributed to the Federal Reserve in response to the COVID-19 recession. This attracted all type of buyers, right? Cheap money, low rates. And so when you add that to white collar professionals who saw their job transition to more remote areas during the pandemic, they just didn't hesitate to ditch their old price apartment in places like San Francisco and Boston for homes in markets like Boise and Tampa. And as if this wasn't enough, the pandemic also coincided with the 5-year window, meaning 2019 and 2023, when millennials born during the generation of first largest birth years, meaning whoever was born between 1989 and 1983, these millennials are hitting their peak to become the first-time home buying. That is the age of 30 years old. So all of this happening all at the same time. So we're adding to the equation all the investors, all the low rates. We're adding free access to money or easy access to money, to say the least. And in addition to that, we're adding all of the millennials who are ready to become homeowners. So when you add all of that into a market that was already overwhelmed on the supply side, because just so you know, for those who weren't aware, the housing market inventory was already trending downwards even before the pandemic. So when the pandemic struck, it just went downhill because nobody else was working. Some people were getting paid to stay at home, so there wasn't enough labor. I mean, you already know the story if you've been following us for quite some time, right? So what in the past was a hesitation, right, to kind of like attribute the responsibility, so to speak, to the investors. Now it is abundantly clear that it is the investor or the investors that help accelerate the housing boom and drive up the U.S. home prices. At least that's what Fortune is concluding, according to recent data published by Redfin, Freddie Mac, and Harvard, right? So as we continue to move along into this article, we can see that in the first quarter of 2022, investors made up a record of 28% of single family home sales. Okay, that's according to Harvard. And that is up to 19% in the first quarter of 2021. And it is also far above the 16% of the investors made up of single family home sales between 2017 to 2019. So we only got 16% here, 19% here, and now a record 28% over here, right? So what are the areas that were more impacted by this frenzy, right? So according to this article, the investor bull rush into the housing market was most pronounced in fast-growing markets in the US, such as the South and the West, according to Harvard researchers. And that finding, it's also backed by a separate Redfin analysis, which looked at all home sales. And in the first quarter of 2022, investors made up a staggering 33.1% of home sales in Atlanta. Not far behind was Jacksonville with 32.3%, Charlotte with 32.3%, Phoenix with 29%, and Miami with 28.2%. And funny enough, those are the same markets that are also among the nation's most overvalued housing markets that are at risk of seeing a home price decline, according to Moody's Analytics, okay? And now, as we move down, here's a very nice map, an interactive map, that shows the area where the highest concentration of investors are. So you have everything from yellow being the lowest at 0%, all the way up to the right at 30%, with purple and bluish over here, depending on the tone of your computer. So as we can see here, the areas with the highest concentration of investors, it's located in Florida, in areas like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach. We have Jacksonville, Orlando, Kissimmee, and Tampa, St. Pete, right? And that includes Atlanta, which we previously mentioned. We also have Phoenix, Arizona. We have Vegas, Henderson over here. And the areas where there's a lower concentration in investor, somewhere around this color range, we can see Seattle, we have Portland over here, Washington, Arlington, Providence. So if you happen to have your properties in some of these areas, or if you happen to live in some of this area, this is, interesting information for you to keep in mind, because it will help you make a more informed decision, right? And so as we keep moving along, markets in the South and the West are where you can see the most investor activity. But that's not the only place, or those are not the only areas where you will see movement, as you notice here in the map. That also saw a jump in investor sales, and that's located in Ohio. We have Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus, just so you know. But there are other areas out there that saw a decline in sale. Not necessarily a decline in home prices, but there was a decline right here. So according to this article, in the first quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022, you will see that Seattle was down 0.5% and Milwaukee was down 0.1% in terms of decline and share of home sales attributed to investor. By the same token, we also have similar results, although they're not exactly the same. These are more conservative numbers, and these were actually provided by the researchers at Freddie Mac. They did their own analysis of public records, and they found that between December 2019 and December 2021, they found that investor home purchases climbed from 26.7 to 27.6%. So that's slightly more conservative than the numbers you see up here, who are generally up in the 30s, right? However, according to this article, Freddie Mac acknowledges that its analysis isn't fully capturing all cash purchases by investors. And they also offer here a nice table listing the areas where they saw the highest number of movements in terms of home sales by investors. And as you can see here in the listing, we see cities that are relatively similar to the ones that are here in the map by Redfin, right? Now, for those who are actually wondering, who are these investors? Like, really, I don't know who's buying all these properties. So we cover that slightly, at the beginning, but we're going to go more in detail here. So according to this article, the vast majority of investor home purchases in America are still made by a small or mid-sized investor, ranging from the average Joe owning an Airbnb rental to individuals who have spent years amassing a hefty portfolio of rentals. And according to the Harvard study, 74% of investor purchases in September were made by an investor with portfolios of less than 100 properties. And the remaining 26% of investor purchases were made by groups with property portfolios of at least 100 units. Okay, that means 100 units or above. Now, according to this article, investors with large portfolios, meaning at least 100 properties, those are the ones who drove much of this growth, nearly doubling the share of investor purchases from 14% in September 2020 to 26% in 2021. And that's according to Harvard researchers. So what does it mean for you? It's very clear. When an investor comes in and buys single-family homes, that means that those investors have already reduced the already limited supplies of properties available to potential owner-occupants, particularly first-time and moderate-income buyers. And what about the big investors? Who are they? Well, they're just simply massive rental companies like Invitation Homes, the nation's largest owner of single-family rental homes, which grew its portfolio during the pandemic. We also include Blackstone in the equation, which founded Invitation Homes back in 2012, and who also got back into the single-family home business during the pandemic. Aside from that, you can also include in this equation iBuyers. Who are the iBuyers? Well, the iBuyers are firms like Opendoor, OfferPad, Redfin, and Zillow Offers. And these companies just simply went around the country making offers to home sellers. And so their business model was basically to, buy the home and then quickly put the home back on the market. It's a bit less of a traditional home flip, but more of a volume play, according to what they explain here. And the way the model works is that on each sale, these iBuyers will net a service fee that the firm charges the buyer in exchange for the speedy transaction. Now, for those who have been following our channel for quite some time, you all know that the model that Zillow had was just basically a joke, and they were out in the media a lot. Their reputation kind of like just suffered a little bit because auditors shred lied that their algorithm was not accurate, and in fact, they were actually overpricing their properties. So just something to keep in mind, right? So going back to this article, I believe they talk further about Zillow. So according to this, it talks about Zillow quarterly revenue and how the majority of their revenues came from the iBuy models. However, the article also highlights that it is intellectually dishonest to pin the soaring U.S. housing prices to just one company. We need to step back and examine that the elevated demand that has come from the investor side of the market, it is clear that they have attributed, at least in some degree, to the large soaring prices. Okay, so now that we know that, what does it mean for you, right? For you, the person who wants to become an investor or who is already an investor that has been priced out by competitors, what should you do? What should you get out of this article, right? So based on what we see here, as the pandemic housing boom implodes amid spike mortgage rates, it is time to raise the question, right? Is the investor rush into the housing market a temporary feature of the pandemic, or is it the start of a lasting trend? I mean, let's just analyze the facts, right? So with high mortgage rates, that means that first-time home buyers are going to be priced out because it's more expensive for them to buy. But on the investor side, it also becomes more expensive for them. And investors are a numbers people, right? If their math doesn't add up, they're not going to invest, or they're just simply going to look harder for the next deal, right? Because they're in the business of making money. So the numbers have to make sense for them. And even if you were to think, oh, well, some investors have cash. Well, think about it twice, because even though roughly 3/4 of investors' purchases are made with cash, these investors, they are also impacted by high interest rate, because all that cash, quote unquote, that they're using to buy the properties, that cash also comes from a loan. So now I want to take a brief pause right here and kind of like get your opinion. What are your thoughts on that? Because when I first read this article, the first thing that hit my mind is, wow, these investors are genius. They already knew what was coming. They knew that the housing supply was low and that with the boom of everything that was happening, millennials entering the market, cheap money, low rates, whatever, everybody was going to go and race to, grab their hands onto a property. And they also anticipated that because the rates are low and because there's access to free money, that inflation was going to happen because it's just, what were you expecting, right? You were getting free money. People don't have to work. People had to fill their time somehow. So a lot of them decided to, buy stuff. And even those who decided to not buy stuff, they decided to invest. And what happens when the inventory of investments are relatively low? Everybody's trying to fight to get their hands on it. So slowly over time, over the last 24 months, you've seen that housing prices increases have gone up to the point that not only houses are ridiculously expensive to buy, but also the interest rates have also gone up, making it a lot more difficult for first-time home buyers or even for the average home buyer to afford. So the question here is, did they anticipate this happening? And that's why they were getting their hands on those properties, because they understood that as the cost of living increases because of inflation, these first-time home buyers will not have access to capital anymore, meaning they're going to be forced to be renting. And voila, here's the investor. Here's my property readily available for you, right? Because at the end of the day, people will sacrifice a lot of things in times of inflation or when things are expensive, but it is very hard to sacrifice on these two things. And that's one, housing, and two, on food. Just food for thought. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I just want to understand your thinking process so I can get to know you better, right? Now, back to the episode. So we already know here who are the culprits, so to speak, of this crazy increase in housing prices. So let's just talk about what's coming next. What's going to happen? Like, housing prices keeps going up, but are they ever going to come down? I know a lot of you have been asking me questions about trying to time the market, trying to get the right pricing, what's considered the fair pricing. Let's just check it out and see what happens. So we have another article here by Fortune, right? So the article talks about how housing markets that are labeled high risk of a home price drop just spiked 73%. And you want to know if your local market is actually in this market, right? So let's just quickly go down here. So we have the US housing market is slowing and fast. And a combination of record appreciation in home prices, which jumped 37% over the past 2 years, and spiking mortgages rates that went from 3.2% to 5.88% over the past 6 months, has brought the pandemic housing boom to an end. And now we're starting to see the sharpest decline in housing activity since 2006. You have to keep this in mind. Activity. Not sharpest decline in housing prices, activity, all right? So what does that mean, activity? Well, it is fair to call this shift a housing correction, it is far too early to call this a housing bust or a housing crash, all right? Because right now, what we're seeing here is that the US housing market is trying to find an equilibrium amid spiking mortgage rates. And if things do get messy, well, the Fed is going to come in, do its magic, do its thing, and try to, put pressure on mortgage rates and stuff like that, right? But that's not really what you're here to talk about the Fed. You're actually here to try to figure out what's going to happen to housing prices. Are they going to keep going up? Are they going to drop? And according to this article, we see that between April 2022 and in April 2023, CoreLogic is predicting that US home prices are poised to rise another 5.9%. So you got it right there. If you're thinking that you were waiting for the right moment, it just simply means that the increase in housing prices just decelerated. It doesn't mean the housing prices are going to drop. It just means that they're going to go up, but just slower. They're not going to go up at a 37% like it had been in the last 2 years, but it will continue to go up according to this study. However, there's a caveat, always a caveat. Not every housing market will be so lucky. Fortune reached out to CoreLogic to see if it will provide an assessment of the nation's largest regional housing markets. And they were able to provide Fortune with 392 regional housing markets. And according to CoreLogic, there are 45 markets out there that have greater than a 50% chance of seeing a local home price decline over the next 12 months. Okay, so the study divided the probabilities into very high, meaning they have an over 70% chance of a price dip. High, 50 to 70% chance, medium, low, and very low. I know this is too much to remember, but as we scroll down here and look at the map, you're going to get a much clearer picture. So this is an image. It's a map of the 50 states showing their chances or the probabilities or the odds of home prices dropping over the coming years. So we have some states that have a very high chance of their prices dropping or resetting, whichever term you want to use, to places where there's a very low chance of prices falling, right? In fact, I actually bumped into a subscriber the other day that asked me a question about New York housing prices. If you're watching, hello. You did ask me whether prices in New York were going to drop. And according to this study here by CoreLogic, the probabilities of housing prices in New York dropping, it's low, which is what we actually talked about the other day. So for those who want to get access to this map, I will leave the link to this article down in the description box below so you can actually check it out. But let's look at that. It's very slim. Like there are very few states or very few local markets who will experience price drop in their market. But everywhere else, as you can see, the map is pretty blue. Okay. So this is quite interesting. I know there has been a lot of rumors, people talking about recession, things going downhill. That means a housing crash is going to happen. And based on the prediction, based on data, actual study done by CoreLogic, you see that the likelihood of that happening is actually low. And if anything, they anticipate an increase in housing prices of 5.9%. So for those who are looking to time the market, to continue to wait, I urge you to reconsider because you could be regretting not buying 2 years ago. In fact, 2 years ago, we released an episode. We spoke about it. We spoke about the facts. I showed data as to why you needed to keep buying properties. Now where easy money was there and some took action, especially our students, where students actually bought not just one, but two. Some of them even got their hands on multifamilies. But I also saw some comments in our YouTube channel of people commenting about fair pricing, right? And so I wanted to address that a little bit because there's no such thing as fair, right? You are responsible of creating that fair scenario for you. Let's say, for example, if you want to go to an area where there's a high chances of pricing dropping, like here, what you can see here, anything that's red, it seems like it's along the side of the West Coast. Like the majority seems to be on the West Coast and, you know, some of the Northeast. And so let's say you check this area, you know, we're talking about Prescott Valley, Arizona. Oh, okay, it's great. The prices are going to go down. But maybe you don't want to invest in Arizona. Maybe you want to invest in Florida. And in Florida, it doesn't seem like the prices are going to go down anytime soon. So what are you going to do? Are you going to keep waiting? I mean, I don't think there's another 2008 coming. Like each recession, each crisis is very unique in their own way. Although we could study, you know, past event, past studies to kind of like get an idea as to what's happening and help us educate ourselves to make predictions, but there's no way you can truly foresee the right moment, the right time to buy. The right time could come for you. And what if you have an emergency? What if you have other priorities? You can have your money safe now, but because you didn't want to pay for that such a high price and you wanted to wait, let's say the prices did drop. Now you're dealing with higher interest rates, which in essence means you're overpaying for something. So my point is, long story short, is if you have the resources, you have the knowledge, you have the team that's going to help you be successful, and you already educated yourself, you checked all the boxes, you're making an informed decision and you work with what you have, with the tools what you have. Because if you wait until tomorrow, that opportunity might not be there. The perfect house might not be there. The right house might not be there. The right pricing might not be there. Or maybe you could find the right house, but you will be in different financial circumstances. So don't leave for tomorrow what you could be doing today, right? So back to the episode. There's also another map that I also want to show you. And as we scroll down, I want to look at it right here. So CoreLogic rates America's largest regional housing markets: overvalue, normal, undervalue. Back to the point about being fair, right? I know that some of these properties are overvalued in their greatest majority. But as you can see here, there's a very low or low likelihood that some of these prices are going to adjust, that they're going to drop, which only means that they're going to continue to go up. So are you just going to keep waiting? I mean, all of the prices in Florida, from what I see here, it's overvalued. Yet it doesn't seem like it's going to drop anytime soon. I mean, for all I know, inflation can continue making its way. We can hit a recession and then you might lose your job. And now all that money that you originally have saved to buy that investment property, now you can't use it for that. You have to use it for yourself. So the point is, just take action, right? That's why you're watching this episode. That's why you're learning, so you can make that right informed decision. Okay. So now we got this. So we have, investors contributing to the boom in housing prices. Housing prices are not going to go up. Yes, property prices are overvalued throughout the country, but what are you going to do? It doesn't seem to come down, right? And if this wasn't enough, I'm going to give you another piece of information. So hopefully it can help you make an informed decision, right? And this one comes from the Wall Street Journal, and it talks about what's going to happen with interest rates. And according to this, central bank should raise interest rate sharply or risk high inflation area, according to the BIS, right? So the BIS is the Bank for International Settlements, for those who don't know. And basically, just to summarize it, because I don't want to make this longer than what it already is. So according to this article, the World Central Bank must raise interest rates sharply, even if it significantly hurts the growth. And if they don't, the world will risk a 1970s style inflationary spiral, okay? And even if they do, the global economy could face a toxic combination of low or negative growth and high inflation known as stagflation. Now, for those who have never heard about the term, let's just put it this way. Stagflation, it's basically two words. Think about someone or something being stagnant and then inflation. So the combination of both means an economy that's not growing, that's not going anywhere, and your wages are not going to go anywhere. You're not going to make more money. And at the same time, you have to deal with inflation, meaning your cost of living is going to go up. Everything is going to be more expensive, and you have to figure out a way to work or live with the limited amount of money that you already have, with everything going higher and higher up in prices. Okay. Now, back to this article. As we continue, I mean, it is no surprise the Federal Reserve raised interest this month by 0.75 percentage points, and that leaves everything to a range of somewhere between 1.5 and 175%, which is still deeply negative in real terms. Now, I want to quickly walk you through something over here, because I've seen a couple of questions on the comment section about what is real, what's nominal. So when you talk about real rates or real numbers or whatever, that means the market value. That means what is worth or what you can buy with it. And sometimes you hear the word nominal, and nominal just simply means the number that you're seeing on paper. So to make things clearer, let's say you take a look at a $100 bill, and in your mind, you're seeing 100 and it's worth 100, right? But inflation nowadays, as you can see here on the screen, is at 8.6%. So that means that when you have inflation at 8.6%, that means that your real value, your market value, the real value of this $100 bill is only worth $91.4. Yes, you can have a $100 bill, but you can only buy $91.4 worth of something, meaning your dollar bill will only allow you to buy less, even though in your face, you're holding a $100 bill. I'm sure that a lot of you have already gone to the supermarket. You have seen the cost of living go up. You have seen the cost of your groceries go up. And for those who are fortunate enough to still afford going out to the restaurant, you can see that your dollars can get you less, could get you less food, or maybe the same amount of plates. But then you're going to see that the plates are actually smaller with less food quantity. So something to keep in mind. And I wanted to clarify this because I've seen a couple of comments about this, and I didn't want the confusion to continue further. So now back to the article. So we talked about inflation going up, and as we go down, well, inflation erodes the value of money. We already covered that. However, if the interest rate is below the inflation rate, debtors are paying back less money that they borrow. So this is actually a really, really good thing. Well, I mean, you always have to look at the glass half full, right? So let's say, for example, and this is how it becomes a positive for you, for those who, find it hard to believe. Let's say you have a mortgage and your interest rate on that mortgage wind up being, 5.8%. That sounds, relatively high for some who has been used to, rates of like 3% over the last 2 years. But once again, if you compare this to the 70s or the 90s, we're talking about double digits. I know that someone over there actually saw a comment. Someone said that, well, things are not fair, talking about fairness again. That, back in the 70s or the 80s, you can live on one salary, but at the same time, back then, there wasn't any internet, there was no YouTube, right? And you wouldn't be having access to this information. Our grandparents didn't have access to information. So even if they were living on a one salary, that didn't necessarily mean they knew what to do with the money. That didn't mean they necessarily knew how to protect their money against the inflation. Versus now, you do have access to the knowledge. So it's a matter of how you want to use that information, whether you want to just sit there and complain or whether you just want to do something with what you have, right? So now back to what I wanted to show you here. So we have the interest rate at 5.8%. And let's say that inflation right now, just like you saw, it's at an 8.6%. So when you minus this number right here, that means that inflation is making your debt cheaper by a 2.8%, because with inflation, the rent is going to go up, the cost of living is going to go up, but because you locked in the rate at 5.8%, now you're paying that debt back with cheap money and you're actually making a profit of 2.8%. Just something for you to consider and realize that this, in fact, could be good news for you if you do things properly. And I know some of our students are already taking advantage of the low rates, and with this inflation rate, they're actually paying back their mortgages with cheap money. Now, moving along, what's waiting for us in the future? Very interesting. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this episode, do not forget to hit the like button right here so you can help this episode rank and help others like you looking for information of this kind. So according to this article, Fed officials signaled that they expect to raise their policy rate to somewhere between 3.5 to 4% next year. And so once again, just to answer your question, things are going to be more expensive. Once again, investors are driving the prices up. So it is up to you to join forces and be a part of that movement, or just simply set aside and not take action. For those who are waiting to time the market correctly and just wait for housing prices to go down, as you can see, it's not going to happen according to this article. And yes, prices are overvalued, but it seems that they're going to continue to go up even more. No chances of going down. And when you add higher interest rate to the equation, that only shows that things are going to get more and more expensive, making it more difficult for a home buyer to get access to a home and forcing them to the need of renting a property even more. Now, if you have been following us for quite some time and you didn't take action back then, don't worry, you still have time. And if you're brand new to our channel, welcome. You still have time to become an intelligent real estate investor, an educated real estate investor. I want to invite you to this free webinar right here. Yes, it's free. All you gotta do is just to sign up for it, and make sure you pick a time and spot that works best for you. Make sure you bring your notebook and your pen so you can take tons of notes. There's plenty of information. You're actually gonna learn a lot of useful information that's gonna help you stay up to date. My team and I work really hard to not only keep this channel up to date with the information, but also we work really hard to keeping everything update, including our students who are part of our investment program. So for those who are actually still not sure whether this is a good time to buy, I think the evidence is pretty self-explanatory. Inflation is going high, the cost of living is going high, making it more difficult for the average person to afford a home and forcing them to rent more. And with inflation, the cost of living increases. Yes, property prices are going up and interest rates are going up, but at the same time, remember, rents are also going up. So it's going to help you offset that increase in price. And yes, I know you're worried that inflation can make things more complicated, but remember, with inflation, people can sacrifice a lot of things. But two of the things that people will find it very hard to sacrifice will be housing and food. So keep that in mind. There will always be demand for rentals, and you could be that person providing that rental. So once again, here's the link to the webinar. Feel free to sign up. I'll see you in the next video, and my team and I can't wait to see you over there and to continue to share the market updates with you. Take care. I'll see you in the webinar. Bye-bye.